But at the very beginning, it's the hustle, bustle, the grind. You're trying to learn everything you can. You're trying to grow. You're trying to expand your portfolio. You're trying to show people you're good, you're worthy enough, and you have these ideas. And so you're willing to waste all this time on do this stuff and have fun in the process. But as time goes by and you start to get better and better at these things, you stop doing those things, I feel, maybe just by default, and we forget about this stuff. When in actuality, we need to lean more into that so we can get even better. And that's going into mastery. It doesn't mean you don't go do it and no one's going to choose you. It just means that you just do your thing until one day everyone's attention is on your podcast, is looking at your footage, your video, is looking at what you do, your public speaking, and they want to learn more, so they start to ask you, where's the next episode? This is the Podcast in the Rough. Tune in every Friday for new adventurous episodes. Welcome back to another great episode of the Podcast in the Rough. I'm your host, Zebulon Thomas, and this is episode 164. Today, I want to talk about a little bit just being creative with your podcast. I want to just riff on this today. I haven't really planned anything out besides talking about an experience that I had yesterday, which was so exciting and wonderful. And I want to give you a little backstory. So in my beta testing mastermind group, I started bringing more podcasters together to get to know everybody before I built the Podcast Success Secrets Mastermind. And in that time, in my beta group, I built a lot of incredible friendships, partnerships, and podcast friends, if you will, and learned a lot. And out of that grew a conversation that led into a separate podcast that I've been working on for a few months. So me and my new friend and co-host to a podcast that we're working on, Dave, we've been building out pre-episodes before launch. So we've been basically recording throughout the weeks and months all these different episodes and doing guest interviews and just trying to get ahead of it so that when our schedules get busy, we don't have a break in our podcast episodes when they come out. We want to stay consistent. And we don't even know where this is going to go, but that's the beauty of podcasting is you kind of just do this and you have fun and explore where it will take you. I'm very confident that this podcast will be well received that I'm working on with my new co-host. And it's exciting. And when it comes out, well, obviously I will let you know. So fast forwarding to my wonderful experience and how I got creative with a podcast episode yesterday was my new co-host that currently lives in New York and I live in Ohio. He was coming through to go to Indiana and he was passing right by my town. And I said, hey, let's connect. If you're going to go right through here anyways, let's spend some time together. So fortunately, we were able to do that. And we went to the park and we did a walking park podcast. That's the beauty of podcasting, is just to be creative and have fun. The night before I knew he was coming in, I wanted to figure out what my podcast setup was going to be. And I know my setup could have been, my two Shure SM58 microphones connected to my Zoom PodTrack P4, and that's the recorder, and I could have still been mobile. However, I wanted to record video. And I wanted to incorporate that, so I had to change my setup. And I said, let's just be creative and see where it goes. Let's just test this out. So basically, I took a monopod and I connected like a bar on top, and I had two GoPros, old school GoPros too, like the Hero 3 Plus, both of them shooting in 1080p. And in the middle, I had my cell phone mounted for the main video and audio recording. This setup, again, isn't ideal, and part of it could have been a train wreck, but my filmmaking brain and my podcasting brain went in overdrive and said, let's do some fail-safes here. And so I said, well, it's very streamlined, this setup. I can show up, I can shoot video from all different angles, and that was the idea, was like I was going to have a GoPro on me, and then the other GoPro on this bar would be facing to my right a little bit because I assumed he would be standing next to me. But sometimes when you walk next to people, you space out. And I said, well, what if he gets too far out of the camera? Well, then I can always switch to this GoPro shot that's capturing more to the right of me, which would be him in frame. And then the cell phone in the middle was recording video as well, something we can see each other. And I thought, well, if the GoPros don't look good, at least if I keep us framed in the middle with the cell phone shot, we're going to be both together and it'll just be one camera angle and it'll still look good. And then I also went a little bit further and I said, well, for audio-wise, I'm going to test out these wireless lavalier microphones that you can get on Amazon. And they plug into your iPhone. They're black, and they come with two wireless microphones. You just plug it into the bottom of the phone, and then you turn on these wireless microphones, and they sync up, and it's very easy to use. And I said, let's give these a shot. With these, I do not recommend them. I'm going to say that right off the rip, and here's why. First of all, these microphones work really well if you're in a quiet space and you're just talking at this level that I'm talking at now. But Dave and I were on this walk, and I knew the microphones would perform well to cut out ambient noise, so that's going to be good because they do work good there. But Dave and I are our voices are bass, and we are very loud speakers, especially when we're walking, because we have all this energy stored inside of us, and we need to exert that energy, and we do it in the form of emotions through words and all this stuff. So we're not going to be walking going, hey, this walk is so great. And if we did that, then this audio would have been fine. But right off the bat, I didn't have hope in this audio. Now, the one mistake I did make was when you plug this into your phone and you're using these two lav mics, you're not getting the cell phone's audio, which isn't bad. It's not the best, but it's just not an open source audio. So you're limiting yourself to just whatever these microphones capture. Luckily for me, the audio from the GoPros were okay, because I was like, GoPro audio is horrible. I will say this, they were outside of their waterproof case, because these are the GoPro Hero 3 Plus, so the old school ones, and they were in what they call a skeleton, I think they call a skeleton frame. So technically we had 3 forms of audio and 3 forms of video. And so we did this podcast episode, and eventually I'll let you guys know, and I'll go back and link this under this video when that episode is available, so you can just go back to this and click on it. But we did the whole thing. We did a 45-minute walk and talk podcast, and it was amazing. You know, a lot of variables, a lot of ups and downs. It wasn't ideal for video, and it wasn't even ideal for audio, because you had like the cicadas in the background, you had wind, you had lawnmowers, you had people walking, you had cars driving by at certain times. So you just had nature. We were in the environment. But all that energy, I think, is still speaking truth, and it's not a bad listen. It's not a bad listen. It's especially a good watch, but it's not a bad listen. Because if you're listening to this in a car, this episode particularly might be a little, quality's not there, might be a little annoying. But if you're watching it and you're engaged into it, then it's cool, because here's how that video turned out. I ended up not even using any of the audio or the video quality from the phone, which I thought would be good. But one, we weren't in frame, we were too close, and I just felt that the GoPro shots, they might not have been as sharp, but they were always in focus and they were wide shots. And so what I ended up doing halfway through the walk was I turned the one GoPro that was facing to the right, because I noticed he was always in frame with the GoPro on the left, that I just turned that one facing forward. So what I did is I made a screenshot and edit where the main picture is us, and in the smaller right-hand corner of the bottom, it's the camera shot of the GoPro of the trail that we were walking into. So it's kind of nice because you can watch us talk and listen to us, and you can watch in the bottom right-hand corner where we're walking, like what's happening around us. And so it was kind of a nice immersion podcast, if you will. And the audio was crap, though, because when I got the audio back, the audio from the wireless lavalier microphone that you can get on Amazon, and this was only like $24. It was blown out. It was horrible to listen to. I mean, it sounded like we were screaming into the microphones. And so that was just not ideal. The microphones, the audio from the GoPro microphone wasn't bad. It wasn't good, but it was enough that I could enhance it a little bit, add some EQ to it, and really just level it out. So you can still enjoy it without it hurting your ears, and the quality was there. And for the video, yes, it was only in 1080 and the quality wasn't too much, but I was able to do some of my, cinematic color grading and went a little over the top, which I didn't need to, and just tweak it. But one thing I didn't do is I didn't do heavy editing on this episode, because I wanted it just to flow. And the only time I had to do heavy editing is, well, actually, I really didn't do any heavy editing. The only time I had to make cuts, I should say, was when we took a small little break. I just wanted to blend that together better. And at the beginning and the end, just kind of getting ready and then closing off, I just, trim those a little bit. So very minimal editing. I just had to spend some time on the graphics and the framing around this video, which I talk about this in previous episodes. If you're doing video podcast and you have a guest on, or if you're, shaping your episode to be video podcast and shown as a, something on Instagram Reels or Stories or Shorts, then I recommend, building a graphic frame that goes over your video, so you don't just have black around it and it's a little more inviting and a little more opportunity to brand. And that's what I did. I spent more time on the framing of this video to brand it. And man, it really brings it together. It really just cleans up the messy, podcast setup and the podcast production level, right? We didn't spend much on this, And again, that's what I like about generating all these ideas and writing them down, and then over time you accumulate all of this equipment, microphones, camera gear. I see people selling off their old camera gear, and I don't do that. I just keep all of this stuff because, for instance, I would be like, well, when am I ever going to go back to using a GoPro Hero 3? Right? Like I have the new GoPro, I have all these other cameras, I have so many other options. But in this case, it was ideal because I was like, hey, these are old GoPros. I know their battery life is decent, especially because they're only shooting in 1080 on these. And you know what? If I happen to, if these get broken, or if, heaven forbid, someone steals it out of, the car or something where we're going, or I lose it for some reason, if anything happens, these GoPros, they're so outdated and so old that I'm not going to be too upset. And I have other things that can replace that. So for me, just using old camera gear, that's one reason not to stress it, and use it for situations that it's like, hey, this isn't a high production shoot. This isn't maybe a big business decision, but it's just something we want to do. So we can take that risk, The other thing I want to point out is having just extra gear lying around, whether it's microphones and video cameras, is that it allows you to be more creative. And that's one of the things I want to express more with everyone listening to this is when you're doing a podcast, get creative. Get creative with the audio. Get creative with the video. Of course, we're trying to perfect it, clean up the audio sound, commercialize it maybe, or just a better production quality. But just don't forget to have fun and go outside the box and be creative. And then when you do this, you'll learn like, hey, you know what? Like maybe the setup is a 2-person setup and you're used to 2 camera angles and you're very clean and they're professional. But maybe that gets boring. And instead you say, let's do a low camera, let's do a close camera, let me hold the camera. Like all these different things that you would think would be sloppy, and you find out that creative flow is actually something exciting, and that maybe that not perfect environment or that perfect handheld shot looks good, but it actually brings more contrast, continuity, and excitement to your video, to your podcast in general. Obviously, you don't be fumbling around with a microphone so you hear this all day. That's not something you want in your podcast. But getting creative is the most important part about podcasting. And so one of the things was I was excited that I was able to grab all these little pieces of camera equipment, the 2 GoPros, my phone, the little mounts, put it together, put it on this this little monopod and carry it, I think it's called a GorillaPod. That's what I was using. I should know this, but I don't use it that much. And I went out there and I just did production. Don't be afraid to start at low quality and improve. Don't be afraid to be already at the top of your game and have the best quality and go and use something that's not as good quality because you want to be more creative. It's all about being flexible. And especially with video, I encourage you all to play around with video. That's the number one thing that I do in my career, in my life, is video. I will tell you this, as much as I do video and I have become very professional at it, I also have lost the just that little creative side to go explore. I've lost the feeling of what it's like to go out there and try something new, because I was like, I've gotten so good at what I do that when I go out and shoot videos for clients and stuff, I want to make sure everything's perfect. But I got to remember to think not just outside the box, but to take some risks and get creative and experiment a little bit on my down days and still film videos. Because the worst thing is like when you start to do this enough and you're making money and this is something you do as your career, the last thing you want to do is go shoot video on your downtime, right? But at the very beginning, it's the hustle, bustle, the grind. You're trying to learn everything you can. You're trying to grow. You're trying to improve and expand your portfolio. You're trying to show people you're good, you're worthy enough, and you have these ideas. And so you're willing to waste all this time on do this stuff and have fun in the process. But as time goes by and you start to get better and better at these things, you stop doing those things, I feel, maybe just by default, and we forget about this stuff, when in actuality, we need to lean more into that so we can get even better. And that's going into mastery. So for me, it was just like putting all the camera gear together. And now that encouraged me this weekend to, let's bring some of these old cameras out. Let's take my newer camera. Let's do some different shots, be some creative stuff. Maybe not do a bunch of filming all over the place and have 30 hours of footage. Why don't we just say, let's commit to a 3-minute shoot, of cumulative shots that equals 3 minutes, and see what we can create with that. That's the only way you're going to expand and learn, is in real world testing, right? Same with podcasting. Like, you can have the best setup. I mean, I've done this too. I've spent months setting up my podcast, testing, is the sound just right? How's the sound? And then I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go live and record. What I should have did is just, with this new equipment, I should say, is I should have just hit record and real world did it, put it out there and look back over time. And that way I would get the feedback from the listeners, right? And I did that very beginning before I knew what podcasting really was about. And that was when I was using my phone. But I wasn't in depth with analyzing the quality. I was like, I'm just going to use my phone and get this done and talk. Well, now it's a little more purposeful, and I'm really trying to produce something. That's why this episode today, it's not something where I wrote out my script and I've planned out what I want to say and I have something to go by or something to follow. I just wanted to talk about the experience. I just want to be creative on this and do a very light edit on this and put it out to you to encourage you to go out there with your podcast, do a live podcast, do an interview if you've never done that, do a solo episode if you haven't, get a co-host, get a couple people in a room. Heck, I mean, get one microphone and have a whole bunch of people in the room and we all share the microphone. See what that looks like. That could be a train wreck, right? And maybe just turn on the camera, use a web camera, use your phone. What is it that you want to do? I'm going to start getting into video podcasts. I say that, right? But I'm going to really start getting into video podcasting, and because I have all these cameras, because I also do gaming. I love to game, and I have all these cameras down here around this exact setup that I'm talking to you right now in my Studio B, my lower basement studio. I got the Rodecaster Pro. I got the great microphones. The whole setup looks great on camera. I just don't do video podcasts because that's not what I want to do with the podcast in the rough. But now I'm like, let me give you a visual of me recording this. Let me give you a visual, and here's where the pressure comes in. Okay, they're going to see me reading off my notes. Not too bad because I'm looking at notes. But what about the more scripted episodes? The ones where I spent the whole week scripting out exactly what I'm going to say. And I only do that so that I can fit that in and stay on track without my creative brain going, oh, let's go left and let's go right and let's deep dive in this. Like I just go, this episode, if I read it, how I do it, and I put this down, this should equal about 7, 8, 10 minutes. And I can knock out those small episodes that are packed with value and stay on course. So what does that look like on video? How many times do I mess up? Because when you're reading your own notes, well, I should take more time to practice that. Instead, sometimes I write these things I'm writing the day of, and I'm like, all right, let's get down there, and I start reading it. And I have so many times where I hit pause or I hit mute, and then I got to go back in editing and cut all that out. What does that look like on a video? It'll be choppy, or like how can I be more professional at that? Or transparent and show you how it really works. And maybe that's what I'll do in the next couple episodes is I'll show you what an unedited version looks like. I'll still clean up with audio quality, but I maybe won't cut out all the breaks. Like just now, I had to cough and I muted the mic and I cut this out in editing. You didn't even know. I literally was like, and I was coughing. What does that look like on video? Is it something the viewer and the listener is going to complain about? Or is it going to separate them and get them to go the other way and not finish the episode? Or is it going to make them lean more into it and go, this is more natural, I feel this is great, and they're going to just overlook it? I listened to a Joe Rogan podcast the other day. It was like 2 hours and I don't know, so many minutes, and I was like, wow, like I'm kind of like, dang, like I don't think they do any cleanup on that. They got it all dialed on the microphone. I would be surprised if they actually do any editing to the quality of the mics, and they definitely don't do any cuts. They leave a lot of stuff in that I would, I analyzed it, and I'm like, I'd be cutting this out and cutting this out. But you know what? I'm in it for the conversation. I didn't feel the need to cut it out. I was just analyzing if I had done this podcast, I would have cut out that. I would have cut out the small break for them to look at the monitor. There's a whole slew of things I would cut out. And I'm like, maybe I'm overproducing. Maybe I don't need to do that. Something to think about. I'm very excited about raw podcasts where someone goes on there they don't even have the best setup and the sound quality is not good, but they're delivering quality content. And the topic is amazing. And I love that. It's the hero's journey. It's the grind. And then I also like those refined, very clean, very professional edits that I've done. And that's the only thing I can compare it to is really just the ones that I've fine-tuned. If I had to go outside of my own realm, my own box, it would be those episodes that are more like talk radio, if you will. And they're very fine-tuned, very on point, very news-like. There's not a lot of excitement. There's a lot of just information being spoke, and the voice is on point, and the quality's good, and it's very produced. That's amazing too. I love those. So I think you just got to find your medium. What is the thing that makes you excited? What is the thing that you enjoy the most and your listeners will enjoy? If you enjoy it, I would like to say that your listeners will enjoy it. But that's not always the case. But I would say you need to follow your heart, not theirs. You can lean into their niche, but you need to follow your heart, not theirs. You need to say, I'm proud of this episode. I love this episode. I like how this flows. And that passion will go to the next episode, the next, and then people will go, oh, I respect that. Or they'll start to feel that and they'll hear that and they'll like that. So don't forget to document your hero's journey. Don't forget to be creative. Don't forget to just grab whatever you have laying around the house, even if it's just your phone, and capturing the moment. Record that conversation in your head. Record that conversation with you and a friend. Record those episodes that you think that people should learn about, to know, or the things that you don't have the answers to and you're talking about them and you're trying to get the feedback from people to give you that feedback. So I encourage you right now, like I'm here, I have all this noise in the background behind me for some reason. I was like, when did my AC turn on? When did my water system kick in? Like all this is happening right now. I don't know if it's going to show through the mic. I usually would just cut all this out. But right now I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to subject myself to 30 hours of editing on an episode that really only going to last 10, 15 minutes. Again, don't overthink it. Don't worry about it. If there's audio in the background, if you've made a mistake, if you don't have editing skills, just leave it all in there. The more you practice, the more you put it up, the better you'll get. Remember in fact, my water thing's still going. I'm wondering if it's going to kick on or if you're going to hear it. Who cares, right? Comment below if it bothers you, right? It does. Sometimes the environment's important. And I'm not cutting this part out. I'm just going to leave it, right? Because this is just me. I just want to say this, that it's like your first 100 episodes are going to be friends and family. Nobody cares, right? They're just going to support you. They probably won't even listen. After the first 100 and you go into like 100 to 200, maybe you're starting to get some traction. You got a few people that maybe are not friends that are listening to you. You got some followers, listeners. Hopefully it's more than that. And then after like 300-400 episodes, you start to get a foundation. You start to get a structure, right? And I'm still not even at that 200-300 mark. I mean, this is only 164. This is episode 164. And if you go and you look, it's probably more like 171. But there's a few episodes that I've gotten rid of that I just didn't want on here anymore for whatever the reason may be. But that's something I want you to do, is just do the thing. Like, do the podcast. Don't care how long it is. Don't get caught up in the quality. If you have the ability to make those things happen, then do so. If you have the budget to spend the money, then go ahead and do it. Do it and see if you need it all. Do your research, but don't get so stuck behind, I have to buy the right thing. I have to build the right budget. I have to research and know how this works. I have to, practice, and then I can do an episode. Just do the episode. Let the people listening to it give you the feedback. Let the public guide you on where you need to be. Something I heard a long time ago talking about public speaking is that you don't choose to become a public speaker. The people, the listeners, the audience, the society, the following, they choose you to be the public speaker. And that always hit with me because it's so true. Like, of course I want to be a public speaker, but even if you try your hardest, you might not ever become a public speaker. Nothing that nobody really enjoys or listens to, right? That's just how it falls. But if you do what you need to do best and you start to share content, they will choose you. You will find that just naturally, like, people want you to speak. And I feel the same thing with video and podcasting. Like, it doesn't mean you don't go do it and no one's going to choose you. It just means that you just do your thing until one day everyone's attention is on your podcast, is looking at your footage, your video, is looking at what you do, your public speaking, and they want to learn more, so they start to ask you, where's the next episode? We want you to be a guest on our episode. We want to hear you speak. Can you shoot a video for us? Can you do this video? Can you edit this video? Look at this video. We've shared this video. Like, we've shared this episode. When people are sharing and talking, that's the momentum you're starting to get. It doesn't mean you made it. And when they're not sharing and talking about it, doesn't mean you didn't make it. It just means that you're in the process of growing whatever this is. You're sharing, you're learning. And I just think so many people are hard on themselves and think that if it's not shared, spoke about, talked about, or they're in demand, they're the top 100, they're not important, and you are. So to wrap up, just look at it this way. One is, if you're not upsetting people, right? If people are not talking about you, then you haven't pushed hard enough to become successful. Because it's only when you become successful that people start to have opinions about you and your work and things like that. So when those opinions happens, you're starting to break through to that success, right? You're breaking through to the next level. The other thing is that it takes a long time for you to create the thing that becomes the thing that supports you in so many ways. And what I mean by that is it's never like the wrong place, wrong time. It just means that you do what you do now until the right place and right time lines up with what you're doing. Like, I'm talking about podcasting. Podcasting is exploding. It's growing. It's turning into something new. And you know what? Right now, I'm just delivering episodes. By the time it takes off and then people go and then you guys look at what I'm doing, you go, listen to all this gold, this information he's shared that can be applied to podcasting. Where's he been? I've been here. You just happen to find me at episode 200, 300, 400, right? And now you get a whole back catalog of my stuff. And at that time, everything, I'm just in the sync. I've already practiced, I've worked out all the kinks and bugs, and I'm doing so good. So listen, I want to leave you with that. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy your week, and don't forget to keep podcasting. Find every opportunity you can to podcast or do the thing that you want to do and lean into that. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will talk to you next week for another great episode of the Podcast in the Rough. Take care. This is the Podcast in the Rough.